Welcome back to the latest edition of Until Sunday, because after that Saturday, buddy, people are going to be on pins and needles. I'm Ari Wasserman, joined by David Ubben, and we officially arrived at chaos. We did. With
We're
Florida State's win over Louisville on Saturday night, we have gotten to the point now where we don't know what's going to happen. You have a column that just ran. I have a column that's going to run in about 20 minutes. And the premise of that column here, Dave, is that in an unprecedented situation, it is possible that the committee will do something that we have never seen before. Like, it is possible. It could exclude the SEC. We've never seen that before. It could exclude an unbeaten Power 5 champion. We've never seen that before, no matter what we do. We're going to get into the scenarios. But first, let me just break down the show for you guys. We're going to start off the show by talking about playoff scenarios. We're going to go through the game that Dave covered on Saturday, which was the SEC championship game. So we can do a victory lap on saying that Alabama was going to win it all this year before the year started. And that's a lie, everyone. If you're new to the show, Dave punted on Alabama before the year, and he got to finish the season seeing it in person, and I thought that was pretty poetic. But first, let me just formally welcome everybody to Until Saturday's Championship Weekend Reaction Show. We're going to break down every championship game from the weekend. I'm in Las Vegas currently. I covered the Pac-12 game. Dave's in Atlanta. He was just at the SEC game. The Big Ten game was on tonight, the ACC. All that we'll get to. Please like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to listen to us in podcast form, the link is in the YouTube channel. And, of course, if you're listening Saturday night, Sunday morning on the podcast feed and you want to watch us live, when we go live 3 times a week, you can find that link as well. Be sure to sign up for the Until Saturday newsletter where you'll get your daily fill of college football news right into your inbox. You do not have to be subscribed to The Athletic in order to get it. But you could get a 1-year gift subscription for the holiday season for $19.99 or 2 years for $39.99 by visiting theathletic.com/gift sale. Lastly, if you want to participate in the Until Saturday Sunday Sound Off show where we play voicemails and your thoughts and feelings and opinions, please call 316-462-9852. Again, that is 316-462-9852. On Sunday, we're going to be having our show a little bit early for the playoff reveal. But if you call in and leave a voicemail, we still might use that. So, Dave.
What
the hell is the committee going to do, man? What are they going to do?
It's funny. Before we get into it, this is the 10th year, 11th year? I lose track of time.
10th year.
Okay. And they've only had one tough decision, and that was the first year. TCU and Baylor and Ohio State. And Ohio State won the title as the 4 seed and controversially got in. It's been pretty cut and dry since then. Or you've had 3 teams and nobody really cared about, who got in at the 4th team. This is the first time that there is not an option for them that makes sense. There is not. Like you said, you're going to have to lock out the SEC. That's one option. You can lock out a Texas team that beat Alabama by double digits on its home field. That's another option. Or you can lock out Florida State, who has not lost this season, and beat a top 15 team with its 3rd-string quarterback, which somehow is a negative in some people's minds. That should be something that tells me how impressive you are. So it's all bad options for the committee, and my advice to the committee is if they have security systems on their home, I would make sure that those are working well, because people are going to be mad tomorrow. That's just what it is. And I don't know what they're going to do, Ari. I think if I'm projecting what I think they will do, I think they're going to leapfrog Alabama over Texas, and I think they're going to include Florida State. And that's what I think they're going to do. What they should do is include the 3 unbeatens and put Texas in, because, Ari, as you witnessed in person, that game happened. But all the options are going to be controversial, and this is what they don't pay the committee members for.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking on the screen right now, here's the Athletics updated bowl projections. We update them as games come in throughout the entire month of November, and these are the final projections here. That looks like we're projecting as a company Michigan number 1 versus number 4 Florida State, number 2 Washington against Alabama in the Sugar. The first game was the Rose Bowl. I don't know how much you can buy into that. I'm not trying to be a bad company man, but I legitimately don't know what they're going to do. Now, the thing that I think is interesting here, let me lay it out here. First of all, Michigan's in, Washington is in.
Yes. Those are the only two teams that can sleep well
Those are the
tonight.
only two teams that can just say they're in. So
Mhm.
now we are in a situation where we're picking between three teams for the final two spots. No matter what two they pick, the third team will feel like they got screwed, and rightfully so. So we have Florida
Yeah.
State, who is now an undefeated Power 5 champion with 3 top 25 wins. It
And would
also
be
beat
a touchdown plus underdog to every team, and
yes,
maybe every team in the top 10, maybe top
yeah.
8,
It
top
also
9.
beat both SEC schools it had on the schedule in LSU and
Yes, it
Florida.
did.
And the Seminoles are now obviously being debated if because Jordan Travis broke his leg. If he didn't break his leg, we're not having this conversation, and we're having a even more entertaining conversation, which is Alabama and Texas for the final spot.
Yeah.
So the other two teams, and I guess if you want to throw Georgia in there, they're a one-loss champion with 3 top 25 wins. I
I
don't
don't
think
think
Georgia is
Georgia's going to
alive.
get any serious conversation in the room. I think
There's
they're
nothing to even
done.
discuss there. Yeah, they're done. So Alabama's a one-loss SEC champion who just beat Georgia in the conference title game that you were at. The Crimson Tide now have 4 wins over top 25 opponents and ended the Bulldogs' 29-game winning streak. It seems almost unthinkable to leave the SEC out. So that's where we are. But the only reason why we can think about it is because the other team that's still in the mix is a one-loss Big 12 champion with 3 top 25 wins in Texas, including perhaps the best win in the sport this year, which is a 10-point victory over that same Alabama team that is the SEC champ.
In
So
Tuscaloosa. It should be noted.
Tuscaloosa, and how could the committee possibly leave out the Longhorns when they literally beat the Crimson Tide on the field?
Well, if you're going to make the case, if you're the committee, the case is that we think Alabama was better over 12 games, and they've got some good wins, but game control also matters. And if you look at the full body of work, as Nick Saban requested that people do, I mean, Alabama has not been a dominant team this year. I laid it out in my column. They lost to Texas convincingly. They were beaten handily in that game. Trailed by double digits at half to Tennessee. They got dragged into the weird game at USF in the rain, whatever. I don't know what Alabama was doing, but that game happened. That was a real game. Jimbo didn't show up really, way conservative at Kyle Field. They barely won that game and trailed in that game. Almost coughed up a big lead at Arkansas. They're up 24-6, almost lost that game. And then, of course, last week they needed a miracle to beat a not very good Auburn team. So what are we even talking about with Alabama here? If they want to make the case that they've clearly been better, if you look at the body of work than Texas, there is not a case to be made there. There might be a case to be made about Georgia, but Georgia lost their last game, lost it convincingly, is not a conference champion. So I don't think that's really going to be a part of that at all, despite the fact that Georgia has been dominant and has some quality wins. I don't think they're going to be considered. So I suspect they're going to do it just because of the way that the rankings looked last week. I mean, Alabama was one spot behind them and beat the number 1 team handily, and Texas played a top 15 team and won and did well. But that's what I think they're going to do. But it doesn't make sense if you look at the full body
that
work.
I think we have to at least say on the show, Dave. You have done the mock playoff committee. I've done the mock playoff committee. If you're unaware of what we're talking about, they invite, I think, 13 or 15 media members every year to Grapevine, Texas, to go through the final ranking exercise with the completed resumes in order to give us a feel for how the discussions go, the protocols that they use, and the way that they arrive at their rankings. And
I think real quick, Ari, before we go into that, it should be noted, because I think a lot of people truly don't understand this. It's not 13 people in a room making their top 25 and they mash it together. I think some people don't understand.
Yes, this is what I'm getting
to. Yeah, it's not worth really going through the full process, but it's a much more complicated process than
But
that.
the reason why I wanted to bring this up
ranking
here, Dave, is that they rank the teams in pods. And this is an important distinction, because there are a lot of people out there, and rightfully so, if you're just thinking about it like a rational human being, Texas beat Alabama, Texas should go, what are we talking about? But they will rank these teams in pods, and I believe the first pod is pods of 3. So they'll rank their top 3 teams, and there will be people in that committee, I'm sure of it, that will rank Alabama in the top 3. So there could be a scenario where Alabama and Texas are never compared head to head, which then nullifies the
Well,
tiebreaker.
but hang on,
which
Ari,
is the
because I
head-to-head
actually
win.
don't think that's true. I don't think that's true because they'll have that. But then what the committee also does is when you have the rankings on the board,
Then
people
they can
can
go
call
back
it
and
out
look.
and say,
Yeah.
hey, is there anything we want to talk about? And in that point, then you're saying, hey, are we sure we want to have Texas
So let me
over
push back
Alabama?
on you on
And
that a
so
little
they
bit.
will be. That will come
Not
up.
push back. Do you think, and in your heart of hearts, you were at the game today? I watch it on TV. I think anybody who watches college football watched that game knowing what both of those teams with the heavyweight athletes that they have on those fields are capable of. I'm not going to go on a Stars Matter diatribe on this episode so you guys can breathe easy. But do you think there is a world, legitimately speaking, where the SEC and no Group A teams are in this field tomorrow?
Yes, I do. I really do. I don't know that we're going to get there, but I think it's definitely possible. I think it's probably almost 50-50, maybe a little bit less. It just depends. There's a lot of coaches in that room, right? And I think that clearly Georgia and Alabama are the two most talented teams in the country. Georgia's looked like the best team in the country all season long. Alabama's gotten hot late. You can make a case for Alabama as the second or third best team in the country if you played out. And this is the one thing that I wrote about in my column. Okay, and I'll make the case here. I think if you had a 12-team playoff and you played it out 100 times, Georgia wins it like 55 times. Alabama probably wins it 30 times. But here's the issue. We don't have a 12-team playoff. We aren't going to play it 100 times. We have a 14 playoff. We have a season that had actual games and actual results, and the committee does not deal with hypotheticals. The committee has never put a team in ahead of somebody because of hypotheticals, or we think they would do this.
In fact, if you say the word hypothetically
to
a committee member, they melt.
They'll
like
say
the
yes.
Wicked Witch of the
Yes.
They cannot do it. So
hypothetically, yeah, I agree. Alabama and Georgia would probably wipe the floor with maybe the top 5 or 6 teams.
But you're not. But focusing on it from this point of view, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I have to tell you this. You're there. But if it's not the best win in the country, I think Texas owns the best win because the best win is over Alabama.
Maybe.
And it was on the road.
But
do you actually think that the committee members who know everything about college football that you're supposed to know about college football could leave out a team that beat Georgia in Atlanta in a dome? Like, do you think that their brain chemistry could allow that to happen?
It's not that simple. And I think that when you look at the totality of the picture and the strength of the candidates that you're picking against, which is strong, this is the strongest playoff field we've ever had. Ever. It's not even close. We have 6 teams that are legitimate candidates, and that are playoff caliber teams. And in
I
most
think it should
years,
just be 5. I think it's 5.
I mean, Georgia's a playoff team, Ari. They're not going to get consideration, but they're a playoff caliber team. Obviously.
Okay, I just mean from the ones that are actually going to get consideration.
Well, but I'm talking about consideration versus would get consideration in most years. And you could throw Ohio State in there as well.
I was going to say, then throw it to 7 or 6. Yeah,
exactly.
They're the same team right now.
Yeah. We've never had that. Usually, like you've alluded to, sometimes we're struggling to get 4 in there, right? And TCU lost their conference championship game last year and still got in, and it wasn't even really that close last year. I think we kind of knew they were going to get in ahead of Alabama, so who didn't win their division, it should be noted, last year, didn't even play for their conference title. So, man, it is. I think if you look at it that way, then you can say, well, it's hard to see them doing that. But when you look at it, it's the case. It's not a case against the SEC. It's not a case against Alabama, against Georgia, if we won't even throw them in there. It's about, look at the other teams, okay? You have 3 undefeated Power 5 champs, and you have a Texas team that beat Alabama by double digits on its home field, and their resumes are pretty close, and has been killing people. Texas has not had, and again, that's what I'm saying. You compare the amount of, shenanigans that Alabama has had to get in and out of to get to this point. Texas, Ari, they kind of messed around at TCU a little bit, but they were always probably going to win that game. They lose in the last seconds to a top 15 team in a rivalry game on a neutral field, so you have a pretty good loss. Am I forgetting a Texas game? They haven't really messed around.
You could say Kansas State if you think that's messing around.
Well, but you also had your backup quarterback, and you won.
Yeah,
and Kansas State is a good team, so I don't really count that. That's just playing your season. You got to win, And if you have your backup quarterback, it is.
Can I float something to you here, Dave?
Please do.
I want to float something to you. And this is something I've been thinking about, and I don't know if it's true, but I've been thinking about it because you and I were in very interesting scenarios in 2014. I was a beat writer for Ohio State, and you were working at Dave's Texas Football, right?
No, I was at Fox.
Oh, you were? But you were very much regionally involved in the
based in
coverage
Texas,
of the
covering most
Baylor.
of the covering the Big
Right.
12. Yeah.
So your publication and where you were. So my understanding and my viewpoint of the 2014 playoff debate, and if you don't remember the 2014, the first inaugural playoff debate, you had Ohio State and you had a Baylor and TCU Big 12 situation where there was no conference championship game and there was some
they were co-champs.
misunderstanding of which co-champs, one beat the other, but then the other team lost to another. I can't even remember. Like it was a complicated discussion.
Basically, Baylor came back from down 21 to beat TCU in Waco, and then and then Baylor lost by I think 2 touchdowns on the road to West Virginia like 3 weeks later. So
what I think, in my understanding back then of the way that the committee probably approached that, and I'm going to wrap it around to this year too before we move on, is that if you have 2 teams in the same conference that are indistinguishable from one another to a certain extent, and you have another team that is Ohio State, deep, talented, whatever, but they were with their third string quarterback and they beat Wisconsin 59-0 in the Big Ten championship game, that rather than picking between TCU and Baylor, which was an impossible decision to make, that they picked the third option because it was cleaner to accept. If you're a Big 12 fan, you can't pick one or the other, so you pick the third option. The third option goes and wins the national championship. And I bring this up, Dave, because I'm thinking about Alabama and Texas and how they are both intertwined in this debate that is very hard. Texas beats Alabama in September. It's important to note that the committee doesn't care when the win happens. All that matters is that it's a part of your resume.
Yes.
But then Alabama is the pure candidate. The college football playoff was made to fall in love with this candidate. If you cannot pick between Texas and Alabama, then what is the final move there? Doing something that's never been done before.
In theory, but why can't you pick between Texas and Alabama?
Pick one.
Difference. They played. It wasn't close.
I would too. I think there's a difference between what you think and what they're going to do, though.
I guess, but I don't even think it's a debate. If Texas had a terrible resume, like they didn't play anybody else the whole season, the Big 12 was way down. They had like one other, top 25 win or something like that, and Bama had like a ton of wins and had been really dominant. I'll engage the conversation. If that's not what's happened, Texas has been more dominant and has played a bunch of really good teams.
If the committee has a mental block or an inability to eliminate Alabama from this field, they cannot do so in good faith while also leaving out Texas, which leaves us with the third option. I'm trying to inch you towards what I'm trying to say here, which is if you're ever going to see a undefeated Power 5 team, but what is the solution that has the least amount of outrage?
There's not one, Ari. It's going to be bad either way.
I didn't say there's not going to be outrage. Which one has the least amount? The entire country is basically in agreement that Florida State doesn't have the chops. And it's not right. And listen, if we're just talking this through, guys, I'm not saying what I think. If it were up to me, it would be Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Florida State. Those would be my 4. Mm-hmm. I think that we might be in agreement on that. But we're trying to talk through what they might do. Who cares what I want? Who cares what Dave wants? It's what the committee is going to be talking about and having.
They're
to
unpredictable,
do when
and the stakes are higher.
And if they're unpredictable, the stakes are higher. It's unprecedented, and somebody is guaranteed to get screwed. Somebody's getting screwed. So what is the path of least resistance to screwing somebody? Do you screw the one-loss Big 12 champ that beat Bama on the road? Do you screw the Bama team that just beat Georgia for the first loss in 2 years? Or do you screw the team that can't score because their third-string quarterback's running the show and looks like crap on television? Which one do you choose?
Can I put my – now, the committee does a good job. Can I put my tinfoil hat on briefly, Ari?
The tinfoil hat should be –
Can I do it? Can I do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're casting a television show. That's what you're doing. Whether or not Florida State can or cannot win a playoff game or be competitive in a playoff game is sort of immaterial. Most people think that they cannot or will not. I kind of agree with them. I would not be excited to see Florida State in the playoff. I think that they absolutely deserve to be there, but I get kind of depressed thinking about that Florida State team in the playoff.
The other thing, too, that you got to consider here, Dave, is, and I've seen a few comments out here, Ari has to admit that he's wrong about the 4-team field. If you've been listening to the show at all for the past month or reading any of my work, I've already discussed how I hate this. This is the last thing I'd wanted. And if this is the way the college football playoffs 4-team field is going to go out, then good riddance. I'm on expansion. This sucks. There's no other way to put it. Everybody deserves it, and somebody's not going to get to play for it.
Yeah.
But so like the season, in my opinion, the reason why I like the 4-team field is that the season has to matter. Okay.
Yes.
The season has to matter, but you can't make a decision. The only way that you keep the spirit of the importance of the games is to leave Alabama out. Florida State goes unbeaten and Texas wins. That's the only way that you salvage the sanctity of the regular season. But then Bill Hancock, earlier in the week, you were paying attention, stressed on the call that they're not trying to find the 4 most deserving teams. They're trying to find the 4 best teams.
They're pretty consistent about that.
There's a lot of
what
like
best
back
is
and forth of like,
that.
yeah. So the thing that I think is interesting that we have to take into account here, Dave, is this is the last time the 4-team field will exist. It's going to 12 next year, whether you like it or not. It's happening. You seen that picture of that little girl smiling with the building burning behind her?
Yeah.
They could do that.
So who's the little girl in this scenario? What are we talking about?
The committee. Light the thing on fire. Do something do what you're going to do. And then walk away from it, because it's not going to be this way. It's never going to happen again. And like, I don't know what's going to happen next year in December 2nd, 2024 or whatever. I'm not going to get this wound up over who gets left out at 13.
Yeah, I won't.
It's not going to happen. So
after the game, Nick Saban was talking about like, you guys just argue about the next 12, and it's like, not really. Like, you think about the NCAA tournament, people get sort of fired up about, when Syracuse that goes 8-8 and the ACC gets left out. Like, but nobody really cares. If there is a team that's ranked 13th or 14th, I don't believe that they deserve a chance to play for the national championship. I don't care. You probably had 2, maybe 3 losses, probably 3 if you're, in that point. But I do believe that Florida State, Alabama, Texas, I'll throw Georgia in there just because I think they should have a chance to play for it. Ohio
Were you
State
joking when you said that you were thinking about writing a column about how they should have 2 SEC teams in, or was that a joke? Or did
actually,
you ever consider that?
Here's the thing. So, context to our beloved listeners. I did text Ari about this. I was thinking about writing a column. The truth, Ari, is that I forgot about Washington. So I quickly decided not to write that because I was assuming that Oregon was going to get in, and then Oregon lost, and then I just forgot Washington was undefeated. So that was
okay.
About
because when he sent that to me, like my eyeballs popped out of my head, and I was like, "What? How's that even going to work?"
My bad to Washington fans for forgetting about you for 20 minutes, but no. So
before we move on to the games, and we're probably going to talk more about the playoff as we get into the games. But are we in agreement that it should be some combination? I don't know what the seeding thinks. I'm not going to argue about seeding. It doesn't excite me, but it should.
Yeah,
we both agree that if we were a 2-man committee, that we would put in Texas, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State. We agree.
Yes,
that's the until Saturday. That's what
our official position.
Do.
Make the
but
graphic,
also we have to say
on social. This is where we're.
You also have to say too. We both don't think those are the 4 best teams.
No, I don't. I mean, Florida State is clearly not one of the 4 best teams. But again, it's the same thing that I thought last year when they put TCU in. I just wrote my column today. You want my honest opinion? I think Georgia and Alabama are the 2 best teams in the country. I just do. But the games have to matter. What are we doing if the games don't matter? If
the games
results
don't matter.
The games have to matter. You can't talk about hypotheticals. You can't pick teams based on, well, I think this would happen. You have to look at what did happen and give it to the best teams based on the data that you have available. Not because, again, if you're doing that, then what's the point? Just give Georgia and Alabama a free pass to the playoff every year for what they've done on the recruiting trail and putting together the rosters that they put in, because that's what you're doing. if you do that. So
Now, lastly, Dave, and listen, you can't do that because I had a front row seat on Friday night to a game that we thought was going to go one way and went very differently.
Again, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can think that, and this is kind of what I heard about Florida State. Nobody thinks they can win or compete in a playoff
they
game.
Conceivably could play great defense.
That doesn't mean that they won't.
Are you sure they couldn't beat
really
Michigan?
well.
Are you sure that Florida State couldn't beat Michigan or they couldn't beat Washington? I would have bet my life on it.
And I think people.
I would have bet my life that Iowa couldn't beat Michigan, though.
Yeah. I
would have bet my life on that one.
Now, I think two things. I do think, for whatever it's worth, that if you're looking at these teams and you're looking at Florida State specifically, Rodemaker in the second half in Florida looked pretty good, and they didn't have him today. And they're going to have him in the playoff. So if he plays well, he's got a lot. I mean, he's just like his fourth year on campus. He hadn't played a ton, but Glenn had some plays today.
A long time.
Like a lot of deer in the highlights and deer in the headlights, and we'll see. So
okay, lastly, Dave, and then we'll move on to the games. Mm-hmm. God, this is so compelling. I could do this all night.
This is like the most.
We told you guys what we thought what we would do as a two-man committee. I want your prediction for what they will do.
I think first of all, I'll say my confidence level in this is incredibly
4 out of 10.
I have no idea what they're going to do, but based on what I think the committee does and how they've been acting and moving teams around this year, I think obviously Michigan and Washington can sleep well. I think they put Florida State in there, and I think they give Alabama credit for beating Georgia and doing so where they were clearly the better team tonight, and they put them in over Texas and say, the head-to-head wasn't as important to us because we believed in their total body of work. That's what I think they will do. Very low confidence.
And I have a very low confidence in mine. It's been bubbling in my gut for the last 4 hours. I think Florida State's out.
You might be right.
I don't think they're going to be able to make a distinction between Alabama and Texas. Both of those teams could win a national championship this year. And I just don't – I think that this is going to – and also, too, who cares about precedent or what has never happened before? It is the last edition of the 4-team field. It is an extremely new and rare circumstance. And when your back is against the wall, you do different things than you were accustomed to.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that, Ari. Is that they had Florida State at 4 last week. And Florida State won by double digits with their third-string quarterback against the top 15 team. So to get Florida State out, then that means you'd have to obviously bring Bama up, which is reasonable, and then also bring Texas up for beating a top 15 team full strength by 3 touchdowns. That's where it's like, I don't know. Like
the easiest scenario to defend is leaving Florida State out.
But if they felt this way about Florida State, Ari, why would they have them in the top 4 coming in?
I don't know, but we have to. I don't think they're going to
suddenly change.
They've moved pieces around. They do. They do it all the time.
They move at the end of the road.
At the end of the road, the committee is just going to do what it wants to do.
Top
but
15 teams. Yeah,
I don't really know if I subscribe to the idea of, well, why did they rank them there last week? It's a different world today. Last week doesn't matter. I don't think.
But in the case of Florida,
people feel
in the case of Florida State, Ari, it does matter.
Message in the bottle. Oh, it's like, oh, the committee's trying to tell us something. They're not trying to tell you shit. They're going to put who they think they're going to put in. It's not, oh, well, they were ranked there last week. How are they going to jump? Or how they're going to sit down, start from scratch like they do every week, and come up with what strikes you. And the thing that strikes you after watching all those games is that Florida State is unquestionably the worst team out of those 4. I don't agree with it. I said I would be in favor of putting Florida State in. What I don't think is going to happen is that they leave either Texas or Alabama out. I don't know how you could have the playoff without either of those. And I think that people in America would probably, at a greater extent, accept the notion that Florida State wasn't good enough because of the injury. But we'll see. Okay, why don't we and by the way, guys, if you want more of this, we're going to be talking a lot on Sunday. I'm catching a 6 a.m. flight out of Las Vegas. And by the way,
I have a 6 p.m. flight to Las Vegas tomorrow.
Nothing worse than flying out of Las Vegas at 6 a.m. And I did it for you guys.
All right, there's got to be some worse things than that.
I can't think of anything worse. You let me know.
For me, it would be leaving the melting pot and having raw meat left on the table. That's worse to me.
All right, why don't we break down some of these games because we still have to talk about what happened. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, we'll be
Great
talking all
games today.
playoff all
Look,
day. Great games.
Like the looming playoff stuff was compelling. The football on the field was compelling today. Great football games today.
Alabama, a team that we left for dead, didn't think could do it, overcame all the adversity of being the number one team in the 247 Sport Composite. Goes into Atlanta as a 5.5 point underdog.
After the I think it was the Kentucky game. I forget which game it was. I renounced my preseason Bama take, and I said Jalen Milroe has grown up. So, and I did pick Alabama to cover in this game, for the record. Great game.
So, I mean, you were there.
So, yeah, Georgia's going to be kicking themselves in this game. Alabama was the better team today, but if you're Georgia, you look at 3 plays probably. One is a bad break. End of the first half, that was not a completion on the 4th down play. Unbelievable throw from Jalen Milroe. Great effort from Isaiah Bond to make that catch. He didn't catch the ball. They didn't review it. That's life. It happens. Then you're in scoring position. I believe it was earlier in the first half. You're in scoring position. You take a sack. You get a false start penalty. What should have been a 35-yard kick is a 50-yard kick. You clang it off the upright. That's 3 points that you cost yourself. Then you're running a little, it wasn't that tricky of a play. It's a fake zone read into a reverse. You botch the handoff. You gift wrap Alabama 3 points. Your defense holds, so it's not 7. But you're looking at that, and that's Bama takes 7 when it should have been your ball, and maybe you add 7. You give away 3 because of self-inflicted mistakes, and you give away another 3. You're talking about a 20-point swing at most, a 13-point swing in a 3-point game. That was not quite as close as this final score would indicate. Georgia was Alabama controlled this game after about the first 10 minutes. But that's what I kind of took away from it is Bama, they have learned how to play in the way that they can play. And we've hit on this already. All the flaws that we were worried about with Alabama are there. They don't protect well. They don't have game breakers at receiver. I
think that Isaiah Bond has really developed into somebody who's
good
been
player,
really good
not a game breaker, Ari.
He's not Jalen Waddle.
Exactly.
He's not Devontae Smith.
That's what I'm saying.
And they're still
don't have that impact player.
In case you're wondering if stars matter or if deep rosters play an impact on the game, Alabama is doing this without Devontae Smith.
Yes. And I think, too, it should be noted, Georgia called a really conservative game. They were not very aggressive offensively. I thought they ran the ball a little bit too much you got to keep defenses honest, but they ran it a little bit too much and weren't really aggressive enough through the air when they're so good at protecting. And they did a pretty good job of that. Bama's front is always going to test you. But ultimately, Bama has learned how to play with this team. And when Jalen Milroe can buy time and you got to cover for 6 or 7 seconds, that's hard to do. And by that time, guys are open and Milroe can make some throws on the run. This Alabama team, it has the warts and it has figured out how to play with those warts. And you can see it, Ari. Nick Saban after the game, he said he got in the locker room and he said he was exhausted. And he said his post-game speech was one word: celebrate. Because he knows that this team is so limited. He knows. We can see it. And this has been one of his best coaching jobs because despite all the talent that this team has, they have a lot of flaws in really key places, and they're a one-loss SEC champion. Huge credit for the Tide. An unbelievable season for them to be able to win where they had all the issues that we've talked about all season long. And we weren't wrong about those things. Those things are there, and they won anyway. Credit to them and Nick Saban.
I just have to say, we knew that Nick Saban was the best coach, maybe ever. He's the GOAT.
He's the best coach ever, Ari. I think he's the best coach.
I got to say, though, if you ever gave into the temptation, and I have personally too, of considering that he might be losing his fastball the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes out and does something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody in the comments just said this. Masterful.
It was.
It is a master class on college football coaching at the highest level. And I just am blown away by it. And if they make the playoff and they are the only Group A team, in the playoff, I think they're going to win the national title.
Yeah, probably.
I think that the Group A could be left out discussion is hilarious.
It is very funny.
They would be my pick if they are to be fortunate enough to get in to win the national championship.
Especially if they play a not Florida State team where you got to dispatch someone. Nick Saban with a month to prepare for you. Good luck.
Yeah, and I can't just give up enough credit to Jalen Milroe in the development that he's had. Went from liability who couldn't throw to a real weapon. And I think that's the most layman way of saying it.
Yeah. And he's still limited as a thrower. He is. I keep coming back to this. He's not Joe Montana back there. He's competent enough throwing the ball, but he's still pretty limited as a passer if you want to grade him on par with like the best quarterbacks in the game. But he's good enough and he knows what he's doing. He makes good decisions and he makes the throws that he needs to make, makes plays that he needs to make, and the threat of the legs. I mean, he's a little bit like Lamar Jackson that he only runs like half speed a lot of the time because he knows he can get away from people and still keeps his eyes on field. When he turns the burners on, it is really impressive.
So the SEC, say what you want. I don't think that it was as deep or as good as we've seen in the past. I think the fact that LSU lost a few games there kind of put a damper on that, because if they would have had a third power that was in the mix here for longer, then we might have a different viewpoint of the conference. But I don't think there's any question. I watched the game. You were there. That I believe that these are the two best teams in college football. And I think it's the way that the season worked out, very possible that neither of them are part of it. So we'll see how it goes, but that was cool. Why don't we go to the game that I was at next? Because I was just blown away again by Kalen DeBoer and what he does for this Washington team. Washington beat Oregon 34-31 in Las Vegas on Friday night. Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Michael Penix Jr., and just the entire it is
Dylan Johnson shout out.
Dylan Johnson is very, very good. We talk about in college football, making it to this field, you have to have an offense that can score. You have to have weapons in order to do so. I think that you could make the undeniable case, unless Florida State makes it, that Washington has the best receiving core in the playoff this year, even if Alabama makes it. They are going to score on whoever they play. And I think that they're going to make it interesting. And the thing that I love about this team is that they are unapologetically who they are. And Kalen DeBoer calls plays and puts his team in a situation in order to capitalize on who they are. 481 total yards, 10 of 15 on third downs, time of possession 37 minutes, and Oregon went 3 for 10 on third down conversions. Washington won the game, then gave it back, and then won it again in Las Vegas. But I think if you actually simplify it like you do in math, that they beat the crap out of them. I think they beat the crap out of Oregon. And people might roll their eyes at it, but like aside from maybe a 10-minute spurt in the game, and I know that's a significant chunk, Washington was in control and were asserting their will on you're right, Louie. Maybe not better than Texas wide receivers, but certainly in the
they're better than Texas wide receivers.
I don't know.
They're a significant.
I don't know, Xavier. We're going to talk about Texas, but
are we counting JT Sanders in that group?
Probably, yes. That's why I'm. We'll get to that. But you're right. That is certainly at least part of it. But Kalen DeBoer, in my opinion, regardless of what Washington goes on to do, I said this to Stuart Mandel the other night. You do these off-season rankings of best coaches in college football. What's not to like about this man? Not only does he call games, and of course, Grubb, the offensive coordinator, does a good job of play design with him, but this team was a laughingstock 2 years ago. They couldn't recruit Seattle very well. They fired their coach, who
I remember watching the last game of the Jimmy Lake era. It was hard to watch, and I wrote about them a little bit last year and talked to Kalen in the middle of the season. They were the poster child for figuring this out, like portaling in a way that was not a complete overhaul, but more of like a rebirth, if that's a thing. They were 110th in passing offense in 2021. And then I think when I wrote that story, they were like number 3 in yards per attempt, a couple of different stats. Like in a different era of college football, that's impossible. That's literally impossible. And you add Michael Penix, They picked up Wayne Talapapa from Virginia, and then they've added obviously Dylan Johnson this year to boost the running game. Added a couple linemen, and in year 2, after taking over an awful team, you're 13-0, sitting in the playoff as a Pac-12 champion. That's crazy. Yeah. Really impressive. It's not it's everything with Kalen DeBoer, Ari. It's program building, it's talent evaluation, it's confidence, it's using your talent the way that it could, it's play design, it's play calling with Ryan Grubb, it's the mentality of the team, and then of course the decision making.
Actually, never stopping being who you are.
Yeah, and I was talking to a colleague. I was talking to a colleague about this, and I think it bolsters something we've talked about a lot. This season, in which I think that as a hiring practice, we overlook coaches who cut their teeth at lower levels. You can coach confidently because I think this is Kalen DeBoer's 10th or 11th year as a head coach. You look at, we were talking about this earlier. I can't remember who we were talking. I think it was Jeff Schultz, one of our colleagues. I forget who. Maybe it was Andy. I can't remember. Andy was out here today. But Kirby Smart was a second-year head coach when he had the fake punt in this stadium, in this game with Justin Fields. That was a game management error. Well, I'm sure Kalen DeBoer made some terrible decisions, in Sioux Falls when he was a young head coach, and nobody saw them. And you learn from them, and then you debut as a coach, and all your decisions seem to be sprinkled with pixie dust. Everything you do is right.
Well, Dave, let me tell you this, though. The thing that I've learned about Kalen DeBoer more than anything is that it's not just the gumption to go for it. It's that when he does, he's ready for it. It's not a grab-ass call. He's got the call in his bag. That's the masterful part. Anybody can go for it. Anybody can whimsically go for it. But in the last 3 games of this season for them, they've been faced with critical 3rd and 4th downs with the game on the line, and they have not only come through by getting first downs through the air and a really great zone read option pitch play that we've never even seen the design from, but the defense was napping. They didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
And it's perfect. So the idea of, I called him the Mozart of play design, and maybe again, Grubb deserves some of that.
Yeah. I don't know where the line between DeBoer and Grubb begins and ends.
It's hard.
It should be noted, Ari. It should be noted. Alabama almost had Grubb last year.
It would have been great to watch.
That was happening, and then it wasn't.
I said this to Stewart in the press box on Friday night, and I caught myself because I was getting back into my tendencies of, well, if Kalen DeBoer got his hands on Alabama's roster or Georgia's roster, this would be the best coach in college football. And I caught myself when I thought, well, he has a quarterback that was in the discussion for the Heisman. It actually might get some votes now. I don't know where that's going to.
Voting will be weird, but yeah, we'll see.
Really great running back, solid offensive line, and incredible receivers. He has those people. And then it got me thinking, they're dangerous. And I think they are. Let's go on to the next game here. Texas wasn't in a big-time atmosphere because of the team that they were playing, but they beat Oklahoma State 49-21. The game was actually bigger blowout than the score indicates, Dave. Quinn Ewers had the best game of his career, 452 yards passing and 4 touchdowns.
354 in the first half and all 4 touchdowns also.
Yeah, he could have thrown for 800 yards, I think. I mean, it felt like watching Oklahoma State try to play, it felt like they had 9 guys on defense. But is this a good opportunity for – was I right? Can I
about Texas?
Yeah, did I hit it?
I gave you this 2 weeks ago. I gave you this.
I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do. Texas is a 1-loss conference champion. No grab-ass losses. Some grab-ass games. No grab-ass losses. I watched them play. I legitimately think they could win the national championship this year.
I'm with you, especially if Georgia and Alabama are in the field. Yeah. If Georgia and Alabama are in the field and they only have to play one of them, I mean, they'll have a shot, right? I mean, I think Alabama.
If Georgia and Alabama are not in the field, Texas is the favorite.
They're going to be the favorite. Yeah.
And why? Because they are the 5th most talented team in college football.
I'm hearing rumors of stars mattering. Are
no, I'm hearing rumors of making a mistake that I didn't put Texas in Group A to begin with. But you make a bet. Group A might not be in there, but Texas is loaded and they play great defense. Did you see that Kelvin Banks block today? There was the offensive lineman from Texas who's going to be a first-round pick next year, drove the defender like 8 yards down the field on a touchdown play. And I was just like, and also too, say what you want about Sark, masterful play caller.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm ready to say that Quinn Ewers is one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in college football. I think that, an extra year in college might do him well. But hey, he's starting to play well.
He's playing really well. Yeah,
he played the best game of his career in an audition for the college football playoff, and they won the Big 12. They didn't lose, and going into the SEC, they hoisted the last Big 12 trophy that they'll be a part of. So, yes, and Joey Nichols saw the Kelvin Banks block. I don't know what else there is to say about Texas that I haven't been saying all year. Help me.
No, you were right, Art. Here's the thing. When we had the Texas conversation, we were waiting for them to do the thing that they've done that's kept them from winning a Big 12 title over the last 14 years, which is lose dumb games. Some teams from Texas did it more often than others, but Texas has lost a lot of dumb games in the 14 years since they've won their last Big 12 title. They did not this year. As far as whether or not they actually get in the playoff, is it dumb to say that that's sort of secondary because they're clearly a playoff?
It is dumb.
They didn't lose a game that was stupid. And in more years than not, if you airdrop this Texas resume in another year, they're in the playoff more often than not. So you were definitely right about Texas, Ari.
I feel bad for their fans if they get left out.
Well, you could feel bad for whoever. You could feel bad for Florida State.
I feel bad for all the fans.
You could feel bad for Alabama's fans. Well, do you feel bad for Alabama's fans if they get left out? They'll be all right. They'll be all right.
No, well, the thing about Alabama fans is that the entire sport of college football is the nectar of desire. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's the chase of the recruit. It's the desire to get back into the fold. Mm-hmm. And I guess to a certain extent, Alabama is chasing again because Georgia is was at the top of the mantle. But they beat Georgia. Like they conquered that mountain today. And
can I say briefly, Ari, there is this idea that people who were talking about, I've gotten some tweets today. I've heard it said that people shouldn't have been talking about, Georgia has replaced Alabama as the standard in the sport. Was anybody else watching the last 2 seasons when Georgia won consecutive national championships? They had
regardless of whether or not you think that's a debate.
Yeah.
Alabama felt that way. And that's all that matters. Alabama's fans felt that way. They were chasing. But I have a hard time. It's like feeling bad for Michael Jordan if he loses $2 million on a bet. It sucks, but you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
They've won a lot and they've had their fair share of trophies. I feel bad for teams that have been starving for it. And Florida State, they've been waiting a decade to get back to this point. Texas has been waiting decades to be this relevant again.
Well, 1 decade.
Yeah, 1 decade. Well, the last time they won the Big 12 was 2009, right?
Yes, that was
the year they lost to guess who? Alabama. In the national championship.
Nick Saban's first national title at Alabama, by the way.
Yep. So, not that I wouldn't feel bad for them, but they also could just go cry into all the rings they have. It's just it's not.
And also
on the scale of people I feel bad for.
Maybe a title contender next year.
Yeah, and probably win the national championship again next year. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But man, I just want to give Texas a round of applause verbally for not making me look like an asshole for once. And it feels pretty good. So
here's to hyping A&M next year, Ari. Let's do it.
A&M. yeah. Well, who's next? I'll hype. I will. I can already hear the podcasts for next year, going into next year. Hey, they got a functional coach and a loaded roster and a quarterback who returned. I don't know, but Texas at least earned my respect. I hope it earned everybody else's respect too, because there was a lot of they're going to blow it. They can't be trusted. From that standpoint, the season was a success for people who doubted their ability to get to this point because they did it. So, okay, let's talk about the other Power 5 game. Do we have to talk about Iowa? We're going to talk about them last. I don't even know if I have the appetite for it, but
I can't really.
Let's just go to Florida State.
Defense
Let's just go to
is
Florida
gonna
State.
play. Okay.
Florida State played on a game, and the entire country was watching the ACC championship game, not because it was a rousing back and forth heavyweight fight, but it was because Florida State's results were going to directly decide, because if they would have lost, this would have been easy.
Yeah,
Texas,
I think it's
Alabama,
pretty straightforward.
Washington,
Michigan.
and Michigan. That's it. There's
Mhm.
nothing to talk about. But we were watching this game out of curious anticipation of whether or not chaos would happen. They ended up winning the game. The Florida State defense was unbelievable. The offense, not so much. The Florida State defensive line had a bunch of sacks. They had 6, I think. Braden Fisk had 3. Louisville was 55th in the nation in sacks allowed. It was 3-0 at halftime, which was the lowest halftime score in the ACC championship game history. Brock Glenn, the young quarterback who was a 3-star and Elite 11 finalist, had 8 of 21 passing for 55 yards. A lot of drop picks by Louisville that could have flipped the game over. They dropped them. I don't know who dropped more passes, Florida State's receivers or Louisville's defensive backs, but there were a lot of drops. It was a bad game, but it was a very entertaining game because
the stakes were high.
The stakes were high, not just for them, but for everybody.
Yeah.
So we don't have to relitigate whether or not Florida State can win a national championship or should make the playoff. But Mike Norvell got it done. You know, I think Brian Brom, to a certain extent, too, deserves a lot of credit for flipping the Louisville program back to the stage. And they probably shouldn't have done this so soon, but they did. And then when they got there, they lost. But Mike Norvell was a guy that not too long ago was on the hot seat. And now he's looking at a 13-0.
We should hit on this, Ari, because in March, I went out to Tempe, Arizona to see your boy Kenny Dillingham.
I saw the Arizona State SID in the press box. Jeremy Hawks, I went to college with him.
Yeah.
And we were joking about how you sandbagged me and took that story. I should have been the one that did that one. You don't get to go back to Scottsdale and live the dream. And by the way, hot take for everybody. Dave doesn't like Scottsdale. He doesn't like the city of Scottsdale. Like, I've never heard anybody say, yeah, I don't like Scottsdale. It bothers me. It's another bad take.
Okay.
What?
Either
it's
way,
a bad take.
Circling back to my original point. And I was talking to Kenny a little bit about just things he learned. He'd worked for a bunch of good head coaches. He's worked with Gus. He's worked with obviously Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell is kind of his sensei in a lot of ways. And he told me, I forget the year. I think it was 2021. I forget the year. It doesn't really matter. But Florida State was like 0-4, I think, to start the year. Is that right? No, was it 2020? Or it doesn't really matter. Florida State fans will know. I'm sure the comments will hit us up. But he was saying, we were 1-4 or 0-4. And you know what Mike Norvell did, Ari? He didn't change anything. He said, I believe in what we do. We're going to keep our heads down. We're going to keep working. We're going to keep self-studying, fixing the things that go wrong, correct the mistakes that our players are going to make. But we believe in what we do. And here we are, 2-3 something years later, and Florida State has done that. And Mike Norvell hasn't made a lot of big changes. He hasn't done a lot of crazy things. He trusted his ability, trusted his judgment and ability to build a program. And Florida State, I didn't think the offense answered the call huge tonight. I thought Trey Benson looked okay. Toa Feely was their best back tonight, but Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson needed to help out Brock Glenn. They didn't really. But the defense did answer the call. The defense is why they won this game. If you had told me, Ari, on this morning, Florida State's going to score 16 points tonight, what would you say the percent chance that Florida State won this game would have been?
30.
Yeah, something like that. But Florida State controlled this game for most of the game because of the defense.
All right, lastly, let's go to the Big Ten.
Do we have
Michigan wins 26-0. I thought if you watch this game that Iowa's defense, Kennington Smith's in here, Iowa's defense played a hell of a game.
They did.
And
that's what makes me mad. They
really
did.
Legitimately, if they even had an offense in the top 70, I think could have legitimately been in this playoff discussion.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have been crazy to think that Michigan had an 85-yard punt return and Iowa had a bunch of weird
didn't score on it.
offensive touchdowns. or offensive turnovers, excuse me. I mean, Michigan did to Iowa what Iowa usually does to other teams. And Michigan never had to sweat in this game. Winning 26-0. I think it's a fitting end to Brian Ferentz's tenure there. Scoring 0 points. I went and added up the drive to 325, and I don't think he cracked 300. I lost the total number. But, the over-under in the first half was 0.5 points. That went under. Iowa didn't score, shut out completely. And Michigan, with Jim Harbaugh back on the sideline, took care of business. They might be the number 1 seed on Sunday. And I think from start to finish, even though there's been a ton of off-the-field discussion, kind of maintained its situation as a consistently great team that can win a national championship this year. And Iowa is a team that fought its ass off after some offensive ineptitude and the drama with its offensive coordinator. And I think Iowa fans can be proud of the young men that are on that team. Unfortunately, the coach and the coaches outside of Phil Parker, who did a masterful job with the defense, let this team down and its inability to compete in games like this. So,
and Ari, can I also throw out something here?
Yeah.
In the Iowa is not a serious program bucket, the transfer portal opens up in 36 hours, something like that. How long has Iowa known they're in the market for an offensive coordinator?
I don't want to talk about this. It's going to make me angry. I don't want to talk about it.
Just point it out. Most programs are making that a priority. If you have a coordinator and you're going to need a coordinator, you need him in place by the time the portal opens to both recruit your current roster and say, this is what we're doing. Please don't get in the portal. Stick with us. And also to be a lure for prospective talent. We got big things coming. Come here. And whoever you get from your OC, maybe he brings a quarterback with him in the portal. And has Iowa conducted an interview for an OC? I don't know. We got to get Scott on here. Either way, it doesn't sound like they're that close. And the portal opens in 36 hours. Unserious program.
Unserious. That's a good call. Maybe Scott will go after that. Odds?
Maybe.
You look at Elong 087 adding these odds. This is going to be good because I'm going to wrap it around. I'm going to present the resumes one last time. Then we're going to do a quick 2-minute drill, which is going through the G5 quickly to get out of here. But the odds on FanDuel right now are to make the college football playoff, FSU minus 700, Texas minus 225, Alabama plus 110. That might be worth a few shekels if you're in the market. That's interesting.
I will say, Ari, can I also say that any odds are fugazi because it's 13 people's opinions?
But I'm saying plus money on a team like Alabama in this situation is an attractive bet to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so lastly, we have some audio clips. We can't be a serious podcast if we don't play at least some coach audio of pleading for their team to get in. Let me just present quickly the resumes that are going to be talked about ad nauseum between now and noon Eastern on Sunday. Georgia has the number 7 strength of record, the 35 strength of schedule. They are 4-1 against top 25 teams. Their only loss coming to Alabama. Texas is number 5 in strength of record, 14th in strength of schedule, 4-1 versus top 25 teams. Their only loss was the rivalry game to OU. And then Alabama is number 3 strength of the record, 5th strength of schedule, 4-1 also against top 25 teams, and their only loss was to Texas. Alabama's athletic director, Greg Byrne, after the game said, and I don't know if we have audio on this, but I'm going to wait 3 seconds, and if we do, he'll play it, and if not, I'll read what he said.
We have no audio on this, but he basically made the case. I think he talked to Nick Kelly.
If we would have had played a G5 team instead of Texas, there'd be no debate right now. I think the flip side of that is a weird thing to think about, which is, then why did Texas play it if you make it like that?
Well, and another case is Florida State. They don't have to play Florida every year. They do. They played in the swamp. I don't particularly care. They went 5-7. They didn't have to play a 2-game series on neutral fields with LSU, but they did. So that doesn't really hold water when Florida State is a key part of this argument. And I also think that based on what the committee has done and how they have acted, they have penalized teams for not scheduling. Baylor used to get hammered in the rankings every year because they didn't play anybody. They reward strong non-conference schedules.
It's the exact
you win.
opposite of what you're supposed to do.
It's just not true. Yes. I get that. I get that sense. And in that specific thing, that very specific scenario that he's talking about, he's probably right. If Alabama had played, whatever school They probably would be. But
Texas played it too,
but in the totality of the whole picture, that's just to say that the committee, by leaving out Alabama, would be de-incentivizing big time. That's just not true. That's just not.
They'd be leaving it out because Texas would be rewarded by that, presumably.
Yes.
Which is the entire point of doing it. Like the entire point of doing is to try to acquire a win that gets you in, not avoid a loss that keeps you out. Like that's the
if Texas had played, did they play Rice this year? They probably did. Whatever. If they played Rice instead of Alabama, and Alabama played like UAB,
someone else, and
Alabama's getting in over Texas, but Texas is in
or if Alabama lost to another team in the non-conference and Texas played nobody, Alabama still would get in.
Yeah.
Like this is the reason why Texas scheduled the game, and this is what you want that. It would not be until Saturday if we didn't at least play one Kirby Smart clip. He deserves it. He, back-to-back national champions, had one last plea to the College Football Playoff Committee. It's not going to work, but here's what he had to say.
As far as your second question, look, Bill Hancock said it's not the most deserving. He said, simply, it's the best 4 teams. So if you're going to tell me somebody sitting in that committee room and doesn't think that Georgia team, not one of the best 4 teams, I don't know if they're in the right profession, because it's a really good football team. It's a really talented football team. It's a really balanced football team. So they have to make that decision. But it's the best 4 teams, and that's critical.
Joey here just said in the press, he's not wrong, but it's not going to work this year.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to take at least 30 seconds to at least applaud Georgia's run. Incredible run.
Yeah.
Completely celebrate the run.
Ari, I think it's not even just the run. That just call it the run, and this is what I think differentiates what we've seen from Alabama. When you look at the USC runs or the Miami runs, these teams that had these dynasties, they kept most of the same core. Georgia lost a half dozen, I think it was 5 first-round picks off of the first title team, and then they won it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then this year they were in position to win it again without their starting quarterback. I think they were replacing a couple offensive linemen. Still a bunch of defenders went pro. Nakobe Dean was out. Jalen Carter's out. And they were still – listen, I wrote it in the column. Georgia's the best team in the country. Yes. But again, the games have to matter. The results have to matter. If they don't, what are we doing? I don't disagree with anything he said. Like I said, Ari, I think Alabama and Georgia are the 2 best teams in the country. We saw them play out here today. But the games have to matter.
Have you seen Ace Ventura?
Yeah, a long time ago, yes.
Like when he's about to say a really big speech or say a lot of words, and he goes and sucks in all the air. Suck in all the air, buddy. You're in a 2-minute warning here. Okay, this is the 2-minute warning of the podcast. We are going to do a high five for G5, and this is where Dave shines. You ready to run? You got it up? You ready to go?
Give me a second. Okay, we got it up.
Clock management.
Give me 2 seconds, sorry, and we'll get it up. Okay. All right. I'm
Clock,
ready,
please.
Liberty. We're going. Liberty gets the job done. Very fun game. Diego Pavia didn't quite get there. Very fun game on Friday night, but Liberty goes undefeated. And now another debate is being launched because Tulane lost to SMU by double digits. And the debate now is between Liberty, who is undefeated, but really had a very poor strength of schedule, struggled to schedule anybody this year. And the idea that SMU could slingshot themselves over Tulane. And also, SMU has not won a conference title in a very, very long time. Congrats to the ACC-bound Mustangs. Who could forget ACC legend Eric Dickerson? So congrats to Rhett Lashley and SMU. They've reborn the program. June Jones had them going a little bit. Then Chad picked it up. Then Sonny carried them a little bit. And Rhett Lashley gets them to the finish line. So congrats to them. Toledo falls. They were undefeated in the MAC. Miami gets the job done. Miami of Ohio. Miami of Florida has not moved to the MAC. Credit to Chuck Martin and Miami. Their defensive game plan against Toledo was unbelievable today. DeQuan Finn was his usual self, but they made it tough sledding constantly for them today. And Chuck Martin and the Red Hawks get the job done, win the MAC, beat the presumptive. Everyone thought Toledo was going to run away with the league. Not the case today. Speaking of crazy results, Boise State fires Andy Avalos and then goes on a run and wins the Mountain West, routs UNLV today. Boise's one of the craziest stories in the country this year. I'm very, very intrigued to see what they do with that job. But I strongly suspect that Spencer Danielson won that job today. And then finally, Troy, 28-point fourth quarter to beat App State and get the Sun Belt Championship and bring it back. John Summerall, very angry today on the sidelines after a missed face mask. But the Trojans get the job done. They were the best team in the Sun Belt this year. Congrats to them. That was pretty good.
Management. That was really good.
Thank you.
Let me ask you
this. If only coaches could manage the clock, nobody would ever lose a game.
Well, those last 3 seconds were, you kept talking after the clock expired.
Fair.
Dave, a smart journalist once told me, when doing an interview, the last question should always be, am I forgetting to ask you anything? Before I go to bed for a 6 a.m. flight out of Las Vegas McCarran Airport, now called Harry Reid for some reason. It'll always be McCarran to me. Did I forget to bring anything up? Is there anything? Yeah. Well, enjoy the aria. It's going to be a good time. Oh, that's the second time I blew your cover.
Ari continues to let our listenership know my hotel. So if I show up at my hotel and I get socked in the face with a sock full of pennies, that's on you, just for the record.
No, a lot more important people there than you, Dave. So
I don't know about that. No, listen, I think ultimately, Ari, college football is built around controversy, and it is a feature, not a bug. And it exists, I think, in some ways to enrage its fan base, and it will do it tomorrow. I'm intrigued because it's going to be unpredictable. I don't know what they're going to do. I really don't know what they're going to do. And I think that will be fascinating to watch. The reaction will be interesting. And I'm excited for it. This is the first time since 2014 that I'm going to go to bed tonight and really not know what's going to happen tomorrow. So congrats ESPN for the ratings for their playoff reveal show, which is inexplicably 4 hours long. I will be watching the playoff reveal, and then we'll be jumping on here. And then I'm going to go to the airport and fly to Las Vegas and wave at you as I fly over Dallas. Sorry.
My flight lands in Dallas at 10:35 Central Time. So I'm going to be hustling.
You need some clock management.
Yeah, I upgraded my boarding pass so that I'm one of the first people off the plane, and I parked in the closest garage at Love Field, and I live 10 minutes from Love Field. So,
and it should be noted, Ari, I got to give you a shout out for our listeners. Ari was staying in a different hotel in Las Vegas and moved because his internet was poor and he did not want to harm the quality of the show. Never say that Ari doesn't love you, listeners.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that the show went off well. And Dave,
yes,
congrats to you for the first season together on the show. I think it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully the community that we built here enjoyed the run that we've been on. And of course, we're going to keep going. We have a big show on Sunday to talk about all those things. It's been a pleasure to be a co-host with you, and it's been a bigger pleasure to entertain and discuss and interact with the many listeners out there that have come to love the show. So lastly, thanks to our producer, Cam Molina, who has propped us up with these graphics and the rundowns and all the work that he's done. This isn't goodbye. But we certainly feel really good about the direction the podcast is heading. I think it's a good time to remind everybody to subscribe to both the YouTube and the podcast feeds. There's unique content on the YouTube channel when we do emergency podcasts. It's going to be a college football offseason here in a month. There's a lot of emergencies that always happen in the sport. And of course, if you want to listen to us while working out or running or driving, be sure to find the feed. And then also too, if you want to participate in our Sunday Sound Off shows, or you want your voice heard or played on the show, never forget to call the Until Saturday phone line. That is 316-462-9852. Again, that is Until Saturday's phone line at 316-462-9852. You can also text that number. All right, Dave, it's been a late night. Thanks you guys so much for staying up and listening with us all year and doing it again right now. It's going to be a pretty hectic Sunday. We're going to be around for that. Thank you so much. For Dave Ubben, I'm Ari Wasserman. That was the latest edition of Until Saturday, and now Until Sunday.